I've lived in Arizona for the past 15 years, but before that, my life was different. I used to live in a small town, hidden in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't even tell you what side of the country it's on, or even if it's in the United States. It was a forest town, dense trees stretching in all directions. The only thing I know for sure is the name, Point Pine. I lived in Point Pine for the first 10 years of my life before we moved away. Once we left, my parents never spoke of it again. In fact, they acted as if it never existed. In their minds, I guess it didn't. I don't really blame them. I realized pretty quickly that they were trying to forget Point Pine. Whenever kids at school asked me where I was from, I'd just say, "Oh, a small town you've never heard of." But I learned the hard way that questions about Point Pine were off limits. A few months after we moved to Arizona, my older sister, Felicity, had a school project on family history. She wrote about some things she remembered from Point Pine. My mom found her project the day before it was due, and she burned it in the backyard. When Felicity got home, my parents took her upstairs, and I could hear her crying out every few minutes in what sounded like pain. From that moment on, neither of us ever mentioned Point Pine again. Except for me. Right now. I don't know what's making me remember all of this. Maybe it's because my father died about a week ago. Since then, my mom has been silent, and she hasn't cried. She hasn't said a word to anyone. Actually, she sent my father's remains off to somewhere, and I'd bet my life it was Point Pine, but I'd be crazy to ask. Since his death, random memories about Point Pine have been coming back to me. Things that seemed normal at the time, but now they feel anything but normal. Take the Point Pine Bakery, for instance. The owner, Mr. Terrence, always knew what you're going to order before you even said it. Kids would say he was a magician who could read minds, and when you paid, you had to tip him with an old item of clothing you'd grown out of. There was a big box at the counter, filled with worn baby clothes, shoes, all tossed in as payment. Strange? Sure. But not as strange as what else went on at Point Pine. Every year on your birthday, you'd have to get blood work done. Nobody ever explained why, and no one questioned it. It was just part of life there. And every day at exactly 8:13 a.m., an alarm would sound through the entire town, speakers everywhere, blaring this wailing noise that echoed through the neighborhoods. Parents would rush to wake their kids like the house was on fire. And then there was Point Pine Monthly Parade. Every month, a student from Point Pine High was chosen to be in the parade, but no one was allowed to watch it. Not from the streets, not from the windows, not even on television. The rule was absolute. Under no circumstances should anyone look at the parade. We know it was about to start when we heard it, a chorus of voices like church choir singing this eerie melody. It sounded like it came from everywhere. The sky, the ground, the trees, the buildings. Everything in Point Pine was singing. Once the first note played, you had 5 minutes to find a place to hide. A building that locks, and in Point Pine, not many buildings had locks. One August, my friend Lee and I decided we were going to break the rules. We're going to see the parade. We spent half a month waiting near the library, hoping to catch a glimpse. Then one day, we heard it. The music started. We took off running into the trees, close enough to see the road, but hidden from view. We crouched there, whispering, waiting for the infamous parade to pass by. I remember Lee's voice, barely a whisper. "Dude, I totally see it." I stretched to see over him. "I can't see anything," I hissed. "Shh, they might hear us," he snapped. I froze waiting, then suddenly Lee dove to the ground, curling up into the fetal position. His head was cradled in his hands. "What?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I saw her. I saw that girl," he whispered, terrified. "Reed?" I asked, trying to get a glimpse. Lee grabbed me, forcing me to the ground. "You don't want to look at it." he said, his face pale. I'll never forget how he looked then. For the first time in all the years I'd known him, Lee looked absolutely terrified. "What did you see?" I whispered. His voice was shaking. "Those things, they did something to her. They're eating her, Cody. But she doesn't even care." I stared at him, horrified. I sat there, back turned to the road, no longer wanting to see. The singing got louder. "Cody." I heard my name echoing from the voices. "Don't look," Lee whispered. "Cody, Cody." The voice sounded like Reed. "Look at us, Cody." I shut my eyes, squeezing them tight. The voices went on for minutes, taunting us. I heard Lee start to wail, but I didn't dare look. And then it was over. Once everyone started coming out of hiding, I helped Lee to his feet, his head still down. "Lee, what's wrong?" He was sniffling, and then he looked up. It took my eyes. I'll never forget those dark, bleeding holes in Lee's face. The jagged cuts around his eyes. I threw up right there in the forest. After that, I helped him out, and the adults took us home. The very next day, my family moved away from Point Pine. My parents acted like it never existed, like Lee never existed. As far as I know, Lee was the only person who ever saw the parade, and he never saw anything else after that. I don't know if Point Pine still exists. I sometimes think about going back, but even if I could find it, I don't think I'd ever go back. Some things are better left forgotten.